हौसलों से मिलता है सफलता का मुकाम जिंदगी में। ये नहीं है आसान कि आप कमाएं इतना बड़ा नाम। एंड आज जो शख्सियत हमारे साथ इस वक्त स्टेज पर है, इनका नाम और इनका काम ऐसा है जिसकी वजह से आज इन्हें दुनिया भर में जाना जाता है। तो एक बार ह्यूज राउंड ऑफ अप्लॉज फॉर ऑल दीज guests in the panel discussion. So we have Shankar Aiyar sir with us. Shankar Aiyar is an Indian politician and former career civil servant diplomat. He is a member of the Indian National Congress Party. We have Salman Khurshid sir with us. He's an Indian politician, designated senior advocate, eminent author and a law teacher. Then we have Anand Ranganathan sir. Anand Ranganathan sir is a scientist and an author. He has written 3 books. His forthcoming book is on India's forgotten scientist. Then we have Sudheendra Kulkarni sir with us. He's an Indian politician and columnist. Sir has joined the Bharatiya Janata Party in 1996. He resignated from BJP in 2009. He has been working for the Observer Research Foundation, a think tank. Then we have Sai Deepak sir. He's an engineer turned lawyer. He's a litigator practicing as an arguing counsel, primarily before the Supreme Court of India and the High Court of Delhi. He has also authored 2 books titled India, that is Bharat, and India, Bharat and Pakistan. Then to conduct this session, we have Shalini Singh ma'am. She's a Delhi-based freelance journalist. Her most impactful work includes environment issues, including illegal mining in Goa and livelihood rights in rural Odisha. She won top Indian journalism awards, including first Kushra Irani Prize. And we are so delighted to have you all in this session today. And for moving ahead, Shalini ma'am, over to you.
Am I audible? Okay. Thanks. Well, it seems I'm the only female on this panel and also the only journalist. Lots of pressure. Okay, before the brickbats start flying on the 4th estate, let me very quickly tell you my survival plan. I'm a co-founder at People's Archive of Rural India, or PARI for short, which is an online multimedia repository on rural issues. We publish our stories in 15 languages, including English, and our aim is to connect urban Indians like you and me to our rural counterparts across the countryside. We began PARI in 2014, founded by P. Sainath, who's a well-known journalist covering development. Our colleagues also work with students in schools and colleges, so I would urge you all to have a look at our site. All right, now that I think I'm safe, let's turn to the discussion for the evening. So the narrative was, before that, may I request all panelists to share their opening remarks for 2 to 3 minutes each. And after that, I'll ask a follow-up question and again a round of remarks from everyone. Okay, on to the question. So zooming into one recent example which affected us all, that is how the COVID-19 pandemic was covered in the media. The Western media wrote about it in a certain way. The Indian media did their bit. At PARI, my colleagues did over 100 stories on lives under lockdown. And the Indian government took offense at how the Western media had portrayed the country's handling of the pandemic, and so on. This is just one example, so feel free to add others. The question is there space or can there be space for both Indian and Western media narratives to coexist in a way that provides citizens with wide information as well as multiple perspectives? And what do these arguments on both sides or all sides also tell us about ourselves? We could start alphabetically. I'd start with Mr. Shankar Aiyar. The floor is yours.
Why only Western media? Why not the media of the rest of the world, the Chinese media, the Southeast Asian media? Most important of all, the South Asian media. I think there's plenty of space for all of these to coexist. But there seems to be a paranoia about the Western media which is illustrated by the reaction of the government to the BBC film on the Prime Minister. I have myself been an aide to a former Prime Minister at the time of the Beaufort scandal. And the BBC came, they interviewed him, they talked to all of us as if they had a sympathetic view, and then they came out with a film that really damned the Prime Minister. Did we ban the film? Did we stop anybody from seeing it? Did we stop students from screening it? Because we just allowed it to be another media event, I don't think there's anyone in this audience who remembers that BBC film. But I don't even have to explain which is the BBC film which was banned, because it is only because of the ban that there is widespread concern about it. At the same time, I think that since our engagement is primarily with our neighborhood, it is very disturbing that there is so little about our neighborhood, written in our neighborhood, that we see in the Indian press. What does the Sri Lanka press say about the Argalaya movement and what it has done now? Well, you have to read Meera Srinivasan, I think her name is, of the Hindu, to learn all that. Why can't we hear through the Indian media the voice of those people? Our engagement with Pakistan is non-existent at the moment. But how are the Pakistanis looking to that? Is it changing their attitudes? Is it making it more negative? Or is there a desire there to resume a relationship with us, which you could describe as normal? When we have a problem with Nepal, as we had over LLK, did our papers reflect what the Nepalese press had to say? And did we, more recently, get to know what the independent Bhutan media was saying about the hints that came from the Bhutanese leadership that they would like to settle with China and were being held back only by, and they didn't say it, but we all knew that they were being held back by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs. Equally, and this is my final example, unless we know what is the logic that the Taliban is employing to discuss what appears to be an extraordinarily ill-conceived and discriminatory policy, we won't know what motivates them. So what happens in Afghanistan comes to us as a total surprise, whether it is the victory of the Taliban or the defeat of the Taliban, or again the victory of the Taliban. And yet, if you look at the foreign page of most of our newspapers, you'll find that AFP and other Western sources are continuously quoted as to whether Donald Trump paid off this woman or not, and whether that constitutes a grave crime or not. But do we have anything similar about Ranil Wickremesinghe or about what is happening in Pakistan? So therefore, we need to create space for all these media reports to coexist. Fortunately, we now have the social media, and the social media is a media without borders. And therefore, we are, those of us who have the time, I certainly don't, or the inclination, I certainly don't, to sit and look at my laptop the whole day, will probably find it easy to discover what the rest of the world is saying about themselves and about us. But what I deplore is the paranoia that completely dominates us. We've had the foreign minister say, "We'll teach you if you tell us then." What is this kind of gangster language? So that's my comment on the question that you asked me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's, as you can tell, very difficult to say anything at all after Mani Shankar Aiyar. And Mani has been very careful today, or at least up till now he's been very careful. But you will see more fireworks as the questions move on. I think that there was a very interesting point that he touched, moving from media reporting in the West, elsewhere, and of course the attitude of Government of India. Let me give a caveat first, that during the years that we've been in government, I cannot say that we didn't have faults and flaws in this matter. We did also react, etc., but it may be a matter of degrees and really how far we are taking it. But on reflection, and in fact looking at how the world has moved forward, we need to find a way of being a little bit self-assured. This whole business of we are under attack, that somebody somewhere doesn't like us, and therefore they're doing this to unravel the good things that we are doing and to undermine the confidence of the world in India. I think India is a larger entity than that. We can take criticism, whether it comes from within or it comes from without. We can take criticism, we can respond to it, we can answer. We have a remarkable structure of constitutional values and constitutional law, in which some extremely negative things said about us, we have to tolerate and perhaps respond. Now, if there is a problem with the media in the West, taking the point, of course, from Mani, that there isn't just media in the West, there's media elsewhere too. There's media in the Middle East, there's media in South Asia, there's media in Far Asia, etc. Why don't we, and media in the neighborhood, why don't we reflect and respond to that completely? Are we too preoccupied with ourselves and our choice of keeping in reference only certain people, whether it's the United States of America or the UK and so on and so forth, and to say that it's high time that the West stops thinking that its problems are the problems of the world. Now, some problems of the West are problems of the world. Some problems of the world are problems of the West, but you have to put things in perspective. We can't be paranoid, we can't be timorous, we can't be bowled over with everything, and we must have confidence in our own institutions. And when we talk about media in the West with Indian media, there are lots of questions about the Indian media as well. And I think a fundamental question about media freedom, whether in the West or here, the fundamental freedom is media controlled by commercial interests? And I think we haven't yet worked on law. I don't know how much America has, but we haven't worked on law to ensure that there isn't a connectivity between people who own business and people who own media or control media. I think that's a very critical dimension of politics in terms of democracy, and I think that's what we need to address instead of getting worried and paranoid about what anyone is saying. If we are good, we are good. You talked about the pandemic. I think the world recognized that we did a wonderful job as far as the medication and vaccination was concerned, and we produced in a remarkable short period, we produced the best vaccine that the world could afford and the world could use. I think that's the sort of confidence that we must exude. We shouldn't be worried about being a pushover that anybody writing an editorial in the New York Times or somewhere else can upset the apple cart for us. We just have to have more confidence in ourselves. And frankly, given that the government speaks with so much confidence, they should show that confidence as well when it comes to facing criticism. Thank you.
धन्यवाद. I'm very happy to be here, friends, and to see that the hall is full, and I'm told that there are people outside. Just shows that young people, young Indians, are deeply concerned about what's happening to freedom of the press, freedom of expression, which are a part of democracy. And shows that you people want freedom of the press to remain intact because you want democracy to remain intact. And as we all know, lights are indeed dimming on freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and democracy itself. And therefore, to have a discussion of this sort in these times is most welcome. Article 19 of the Constitution guarantees freedom of expression, freedom to receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. But what is happening right now? Attack after attack after attack on the freedoms granted by the Constitution. Most recent is the amendments to the IT rules 2023, whereby the government is going to establish a unit, a department, to determine fake news and immediately order digital platforms to take down news that are inconvenient, uncomfortable to the government. Which, as you all know, the new owner of Twitter has already succumbed. He said that I don't want my employees to be jailed. If the government says take down this news, I'll immediately comply. Elon Musk. So this is the situation that we are in. We have to safeguard freedom of expression, and while safeguarding freedom of expression, of course we must be patriotic. We are all of us patriotic, and this whole notion of calling people who don't agree with the ruling establishment as anti-national, Gaddar, and they go to the extent of even calling retired judges people belonging to the anti-India gang. And this is being said by none other than the law minister. And he also threatens them that they'll have to pay a price if they can threaten retired judges. What about lowly journalists? So friends, as I said, lights are dimming on democracy and on freedom of expression. Now coming to the specific subject of today's debate, as has been very rightly pointed out by Maniji and Salman Bhai, why are we so obsessed only with the Western media and narratives? Of course, there are certain aspects of the Western media that we all appreciate. But out of the 180 plus countries, the Western countries are just about less than 40. India being the largest democracy and already the most populous nation in the world, are we engaging with the rest of the world? It's as if the rest of the world doesn't exist. When you see the media today, as has been pointed out already, and we have already forgotten that the Western media is an instrument for perpetuating Western imperialism, Western hegemony. The Western media is just the front for continuing, perpetuating the Western domination of the world. Now, is that acceptable to us? Of course, the government criticizes the West when the West, such as the BBC or New York Times, say something critical. But as a nation, we are not really taking the lead in creating a new information order, new media order that is equitable, that is just, that is democratic. Some efforts started when we were leading the NAM movement, non-aligned movement. You will recall that was a time when India was actually talking about creating a new media order as part of a new global order. We don't any longer talk about changing the world order. We want to be part of the West. We want to be good in the good books of the West, America. We only criticize the West when they criticize some aspects of our politics or governance or communal relations. I would end with one point. I was very happy to know from your introduction that you belong to this wonderful and perhaps unique platform called PARI, which, friends, is the only platform that brings information and news and views from rural India. Rural India has become invisible in the mainstream media, which itself is so undemocratic. And this has happened because we are imitating the West. We are imitating the West in so many ways. So, we have become like American media, like the Western media. We've become corporate controlled, a point that was mentioned by Salmanji. So if we want democracy, press freedom to be defended and even made more mature, we have to make the media truly democratic, which means out of the control of both the government, ruling establishment, as well as corporate forces. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure and honor, and I thank the organizers for inviting me and Sai and everyone else. A real pleasure. And Shalini, the moderator. It's an absolutely wonderful auditorium as well, and I'm walking the hallowed portals of SRCC after 34 years. It's really remarkable. I came here in 1989, but then my board aggregate wasn't 100%, so I joined the next best college, which is St. Stephen's College. Yes, and although we have a debate here on that, but in the lovely spirit of the debate, and in that sense, I think we all owe a lot to Mani, his wonderful self-deprecating style, and a little bit of sarcasm and bite and everything that goes on in debates. It's wonderful to have that in this debate as well. And just a small anecdote of how we are all children of Mani in one sense. I didn't mean to give away his age by saying that. He doesn't look a day older than 95. But at the alumni meet in St. Stephen's College, the one preceding him was ex-Foreign Minister Natwar Singh, and he got very soggy-eyed, and he wrote in the register that everything I am today, I owe it to this college. And then he went away, and Mani followed him, and then Mani scribbled underneath what Natwar had written, "Why blame the college?" So that's... But coming swiftly back to the topic of the debate, I have to say this in the spirit that I'm sure the other side would accept gracefully, is that even a drunk acupuncturist deliver less pain per square inch than the arguments that we've heard so far from the other side. The reason for that is, and abhi to Sai bhi baki hai, but the reason for that is, which world are we living in? I mean, it's just shocking, because this is the world of social media. You can't fool anyone now, especially the younger generation. I mean, it's just And let me start off by saying that we believe what we see. But unfortunately, what we see is increasingly being written by people who see what they believe. And that is what the media is. They are seeing what they believe. Journalism is justice delivered without the courts. It is a public good. It is as important as delivering justice. And I'm stating the obvious here, but the tragedy is that most of the journalists that you see are busy peddling narratives. They have become activists. They're not balanced anymore. They're not objective anymore. Even in science that the moderator talked about COVID. And I say, please do not bring politics into science, because all then you would end up with is political science. But and there's nothing wrong in that. But there are a dozen, I don't know how much time we have, whatever X time I have, I'll take 30 seconds more than that. But the fact of the matter is I can bust a dozen narratives, fake narratives over the last 8 years that have been peddled. And Sai can maybe bust a dozen more narratives. But it's tiresome after a while, because then you are left asking, what is the journalist's job? If the reader, if the viewer is there to bust the narratives, let me take what the other side, and I just mean other side as a rhetorical thing, that we're all the same. We're all on the same side, right? But at least in this debate, let me pick up the two issues that they talked of. Mani talked about BBC, he talked about Bofors, and he talked about how well-meaning and gracious the government was. I don't need to open that Pandora's box. I don't need to tell you how much stress and how much draconian measures were put under Chitra Subramaniam when she was doing the story of Bofors by Rajiv Gandhi and the PMO. I don't need to tell you when Mani talks about the BBC and saying, we didn't ban the BBC film. Right, you didn't ban the film. You banned the BBC for 2 years. And it wasn't under the emergency. It was before the emergency. 2 years. So, and this is the problem with journalism. It's somehow, over the last 8 years, it is giving the impression that everything bad that is happening in this country is happening for the first time. That before 2014, India was a Garden of Eden. Everything was perfect. And then we had this Cambrian explosion, that everything that could go wrong, except for a nuclear explosion, which we don't even know, maybe some newspaper would report a nuclear explosion has also happened. But everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Let me pick up the other thing that Mr. Kulkarni talked of. His exact expression was, lights are dimming. Honestly, they seem pretty bright to me out here. Democracy is under threat. Democracy is under threat. This is ridiculous. And I'll prove it. And this is the last fake narrative that I'm going to bust, and before I pass it on to Sai. This democracy is under threat. Everything. The biggest test of a functioning democracy, and my good friend Salman would agree because he's in the court, he's an eminent lawyer, are two things. The independence of the Supreme Court and the independence of the Chief Election Commission. Other than these two things, everything else is at the mercy of our Constitution. And I put it to you, I don't know what will happen to me once I say this, that we have been a banana republic ever since we became a republic. Our Constitution does not respect freedom of speech and expression, period. And whatever little it did was then soon trampled within a few years by Nehru's First Amendment. I'll come to that in a minute. Chacha ji ki baat karunga abhi. The fact of the matter is that all those who say democracy is dead, lights are dimming, and everything is happening for the first time, this assault on democracy, sedition charges, anti-national. Do they even know that under the UPA, and I'm not talking of Indira Gandhi emergency, and one doesn't need to go as far back as that. Let's go back only 8 or 9 years. Under the UPA, it filed 12,000 sedition charges. on activists. 8,500 on the same day. And the then Home Minister, Mr. Chidambaram, yes, when he was asked, why are you doing this, he said, and I quote him, these are all anti-nationals. आपके एंटी नेशनल और आज के जो चल रहे हैं एंटी नेशनल उसका क्या? There are so many other examples like that, and what does it even need to go back to the UPA days? Chhattisgarh government, Congress ruled government, they slapped a sedition charge on a person who complained of a blackout, a power cut. They filed a sedition charge under him. So many things are happening right now in Congress ruled states, but democracy is flourishing there. In Bengal, a non-BJP ruled state, a chemistry professor shared a cartoon of Mamata Banerjee. He was arrested. 2 weeks ago, this news, we don't even know because the Telegraph is all very prim and proper and doesn't want to go against Mamata. He was acquitted after 11 years, a chemistry professor. 11 years. Democracy is flourishing in Bengal. So, when we are this selective, we need to answer ourselves more than we can answer the public, because journalism is a public good. And last couple of minutes I want to take, because this narrative really has to be busted. We all believe and we know that yes, Rajiv Gandhi banned a few things. He wasn't really liberal, the paragon of liberty and equality and fraternity. Indira Gandhi, of course, brought in the emergency. A lot of things that this government has done is also draconian, and I have a list of that. This government, for example, the BJP government in Gujarat, it jailed an editor for 15 days because he criticized the COVID response of the then Chief Minister of Gujarat. So yes, all these things are happening. In fact, the most iconic phrase in the last 10 years that has been coined has been by Mr. Arun Shourie, when he says that all the BJP is Congress plus cow. And AAP of course is Congress plus Lamao, LMAO, but that's another matter. BJP is no different from the Congress. Please realize this. Everything that the BJP is doing right now, everything wrong and everything right, the Congress has done it before. There's nothing, there is no, and you talk of corruption, I say BJP is corrupt. You know why? Because the High Court convicted the BJP of taking illegal money and violating the FCRA rules. The punishment for that is 5 years imprisonment of the party head. Mr. Nadda would be rotting in Tihar right now. But what happened? The mistake that the court did was that the court also convicted rightly the Congress party. अब ये बीजेपी और कांग्रेस दोनों मिलके retrospectively they amended the FCRA Act going back to the emergency era. The High Court was toothless. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was convicted. Why doesn't the Congress say that the BJP is corrupt? Because the Congress has also been convicted. This is the problem in this country. Nobody tells you these facts. People only tell you one-sided stories, like, for example, that Nehru was the paragon of liberty and freedom. Everything else, Indira Gandhi might have done emergency, but Nehru nahi. Chacha Nehru didn't. Let me take the next couple of minutes and tell you what the status of freedom of speech and expression under Pandit Nehru was. Under Jawaharlal Nehru, the first amendment was brought in. Reasonable restrictions, incitement, disruption of public order. Who decides who is disrupting public order through freedom of speech? Poet Majru Sultanpuri was jailed for 1 year for calling Nehru Hitler ka chela. 1 year. One of our greatest songwriters and poets rotted in jail. Did you know that? First democratically elected communist government in Kerala was dismissed. Congress president said communist parties wouldn't be allowed to participate in general elections. Stanley Woopert's book 9 Hours to Rama was banned. The book Chandra Mohini was banned. Audrey Menon's The Ramayana was banned. Campbell's The Heart of India was banned. Koestler's The Lotus and the Robot was banned. Import of any newspaper that undermined friendly relations. No, I need to go on. I need to go on because this rubbish fake narrative needs to be busted right here and right now. Flischter's Aisha was banned. Bertrand Russell's Unarmed Victory was banned. Robson's film 9 Hours to Rama was banned. Sadhnu's Markane Somnath was banned. Robert Taylor's The Dark Urge was banned. Selling Lady Chatelier's Lover was banned. The book What Has Religion Done for Mankind was banned. Ratnavak's Bhupat Singh was banned. Import of any obscene drawing or painting was banned. Mrinal Sen's film Neel Akshar Niche was banned. Menon's Rama Retold was banned. Tony Hagen's book Nepal was banned. The RSS organizer was censored, its publishers prosecuted. Film Gokur Shankar was banned. Godse's testimony was banned. Goswami's film Runumi was banned. Historian Dharampal was jailed and criticized for Nehru for Indochina War. Releasing the film 1962 war film Bhool Na Jana was blocked. Pandit Rajendra Prasad's speech was barred from distribution. Film Jharna was banned. Draconian press objectionable ban was passed. Columnist Vivek was fired. His column critical of Nehru discontinued. HT editor Durga Das was fired. His column critical of the Nehru family discontinued. Congress leaders demanding Nehru's resignation were arrested and jailed. Ads to Times of India was discontinued for speaking against government policy. Magazine Crossroads was banned. Play Nigam Communistike was banned. Its actors arrested. Hindi film songs were banned from being played in the AIR. Congress demanded a ban on iconic film Parasakti. Film Nastik was banned. Vupat pop music was banned from AIR. People's Theatre Association was banned. Play Hariganaz Master was banned. Film Ganga Jamna was blocked. Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay's play Mahesh was banned. Tagore's play Gora was banned. Balraj Sani's play Jadoo Ki Kursi was banned. Tagore's play Bharat Srinajan was banned. Paradeep film song was deleted. 2 songs from Fifth Subah Hogi were banned. Harmonium was banned. This is Jawaharlal Nehru, the paragon of freedom of speech and liberty. Is there anything left to be said? If it is, I pass it on to Sai.
This is the Sri Ram College, right? Yeah. Jai Sri Ram. Right. So first of all, thanks to the organizers for putting together such a fantastic event and the audience for turning up in such brilliant numbers. As usual, I think the alleys have been converted, or the aisles have been converted into pathshalas. Thank you so very much. I was wondering, I was just going through the email that was sent to us on the topic. The topic was, can Western narratives and Indian narratives, or Western media and Indian media coexist? If I were on the other side, I would have stuck to the topic. This is a textbook instance of Aa Bail Mujhe Maar. You've opened the Pandora's box by speaking about freedom of speech, when instead the topic was slightly different. Good. The can of worms has been opened, so let the floodgates open. Now we are being told that free speech in this country is almost on the verge of extinction. So Anand rightly pointed out the First Amendment to the Constitution. So I'll explain the backdrop to it. So Mr. Nehru seriously was interested in pushing his land reforms agenda. I am not on the question of whether it was right or wrong. I'm just saying that he had a certain policy initiative which he wanted pushed. You know who was actually raising the red flag to his initiative? The ones who raised the red flag always, the communists. Okay? So people like Romesh Thapar started writing against it. And there was active opposition to everything that he was doing. Courts were overturning his judgments, or rather his initiatives through judgments. So 2 consequences happened simultaneously around that particular period, which till date affect the Constitution. The first is the introduction of severe limitations on free speech. The second is the introduction of the 9th schedule to the Constitution, which effectively protects all those land reform legislations from any kind of constitutional challenge. Imagine an elected government in a democracy taking a policy decision and ensuring that that policy decision is immune from judicial review through a constitutional amendment for all time to come. And we are being taught democracy by the scions and descendants of this legacy. Second, today we are suddenly being told
oh, social media explosion is the reason for survival of free speech in this country. Otherwise, you see free speech has been bought by mercantile interests and so on and so forth. Who introduced Section 66A to gag free speech on social media? Section 66A of the Information Technology Act was introduced by the UPA government with the broadest of possible restrictions on free speech, where even any kind of offense or hurt that is caused to sentiments immediately attracts the application of that particular section. This is what ultimately resulted in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. The sad part or the unfortunate part or perhaps the cynical part of the reality is the BJP defended that particular provision in court when the matter was being heard, because by then the BJP had taken over. So what does this tell you ultimately? That the nature of power, regardless of which party is in power, is to appropriate as much space to it as possible and limit the scope for free speech. There is really no one in this hammam, I leave it at that, who is capable of saying, I'm clothed. Okay? So therefore, let's not take a moral high ground here. Let's be realistic about what is it that we want and what is it that is good in the interest of the public. Let's speak of that. Now let's talk about what's happening in the West, so on and so forth. I think the binary division between Western media and Indian media no longer exists for a good reason. Because it's not a question of who's from the West and who's from India. It's a question for who's batting for Indian interests. That is what ultimately matters. Because there are several people, several journalists in the West who are willing to speak the truth about Bharat and who do not share the colonial cynicism of the rest of their Western compatriots. Similarly, there are several people from Bharat who are more than happy to be lackeys of anti-Indian mouthpieces from the West. That's a fact. So therefore, I'm not interested in this binary argument anymore. During COVID, there were several fantastic Twitter handles from the West which were actually reporting on the kind of measures that a country such as Bharat, the scale of its population, was undertaking to provide resources to its people, while people within were constantly pulling us down. Now here is the interesting part. Mr. Kulkarni rightly points out, and I would say significantly that holds good, that Western media, including Hollywood so to speak, has managed to push the Western agenda as much as possible. It's unfortunate that we are aping everything wrong from the West, but we are not doing it as far as this issue is concerned. And then when we say that there are certain portions of the media, there are certain segments of the media who seem to be comfortable constantly pulling India down, we are then accused of being anti-free speech. Okay, so we are being told that free speech is effectively under challenge because mercantile interests are holding them to ransom. Why don't we speak of political parties owning channels? In the South, business interests and media interests merge and they're controlled by parties. You want a standing example? The Sun Group owned by the DMK, which has been a partner not just to the Congress, but also to the BJP. Because after all, the Commerce Minister during Mr. Vajpayee's tenure, who was leading India in the Doha negotiations with respect to World Trade Organization, was Murasoli Maran from DMK. Neither party deemed it fit to crack down on the holding of media interests by political interests or political organizations. That has never happened. Why just the DMK? Jayalalitha also owned Jaya TV, which continues to be run by the ADMK. I would say it's much better for a mercantile interest to own, let's say, a media organization as opposed to a political interest, because there's a serious conflict of interest on both sides. That's a discussion that we don't seem to be having here. Now, ghoom phir ke abhi baat jo hai, it has become about only the Congress and the BJP. I would say at this point, members who are listening to this should actually say we are sick and tired of this nonsense. We'd like to actually have a discussion which goes beyond the BJP and the Congress. And we'd like to talk. Because until the cows come home, this battle will go on. But nevertheless, given the fact, the cow, of course, pun intended, given the fact that the Congress has been in power for a longer period of time, ask any student of constitutional law. Almost every decision on free speech involves a clampdown on free speech by Congress-ruled governments, either at the state or the center. So at the very least, the Congress must take a look at its own history before it starts pontificating to the rest. And you're certainly in no position to pontificate today. When all the information is out in the public domain through the social media, people have access to judgments, people have access to decisions, file noting, so on and so forth. You're in no position to pontificate. To ape him, 30 seconds. Yes? So I would only request you to ask yourself only one thing. Self-regulation in India is a non-existing word. It's a non-existing concept. There's not a single body that can be trusted to regulate itself. I say this as much of the judiciary when it comes to its collegium system, and I say this as much of the media. Now, on the point that Mr. Kulkarni raised, that the government is thinking of setting up a center which can crack down on fake news. The Press Guild does nothing. The Press Council of India does nothing. No action has been taken against any organization or any portal or, let's say, individual journalist for their direct role in, let's say, spreading or manufacturing fake news. What are we supposed to do? You can't go to a court asking for directions against a private party in a writ petition. So what do you do then? The government has the task. You know why? Because if fake news starts on WhatsApp, particularly in the context of riots or any kind of communal violence, so to speak, and let's assume that the trigger is a lie, it falls upon the government to have a mechanism to actually trace that lie back and also perhaps nip it at the bud. So if the government were to actually go against all kinds of news, that's a different issue. But to say that the government doesn't even have the right to go after fake news when self-regulation as a concept is completely failed in this country, I'm sorry to say, what are we really batting for? This is exactly what happens when you choose to go after every policy initiative merely because it's the BJP at the helm or the Congress at the helm without asking what is right and what is wrong. I can pander to the gallery here by reducing this to a television debate, but this is SRCC. I think you're better, right? And therefore, I would urge you to put pressure on debaters and panelists to stick to the issue, at least in their own interest.
Thank you, panelists. I'm sorry, I've been told there's a shortage of time, so I'm just going to leave you with one idea, which is that we've spoken about the two parties, the governments, the historical perspectives, present day, all of that. We're looking at times of artificial intelligence, right? Where technology can make news gathering more efficient, but it can also allow fake news to get more creative. I would have liked people to respond to that, but unfortunately we're out of time, so we'll have to wrap it up here, and thank you for being a great audience.
Why did we run out of time? Because there was no equity in the use of time. Thank you.
We started late.
If you want a victim card, I have one victim card.
Just a last comment. I thought if you give peanuts, you get monkeys. But I've suddenly realized they need bananas. That's gorillas. That's terrible. That's a lot of power, but not a lot of thought. Frankly, you needed a serious discussion about foreign media and Indian media. What we got a serious discussion is about Congress and the BJP, both being very bad. I don't know if they were here saying that go for Aam Aadmi Party or something else. I'm not very clear about that.
The question is, who started it?
Thank you so much, everyone, for being a great audience. I'd like to invite our Professor Dr. S. Prakash and our Professor Dr. Kuljit Kaur to please felicitate the guests.
Thank you so much. Sir, 1 minute आप आगे आ जाइए सर. सर का लुक जी सर. एक ग्रुप फोटो